This all happened in a place called North Lakes in Queensland, Australia. I was 19 years old. My parents sat me down and told me that now that I was an adult, I'd be moving out. They had already rented a small house just a few streets away from where we were currently living, so I could develop some independence. The house was still close enough to be in walking distance, so if I needed them, they were right there, and I'd be able to walk Sunday mornings to have breakfast with them each weekend. This was okay for me. In fact, I was actually kind of happy about it. I loved my parents. We had a very good relationship. I felt living this close to them wasn't too intimidating. I could still learn some independence, but they were also going to pay my rent, so it wouldn't be too much of a shock to my system. My parents got to have, finally, some alone space to enjoy their marriage after so long. The house that they had rented turned out to be a small A-frame. It had a ramp that went up to the front door instead of stairs. We moved around a few times while I was growing up, and every friend's house that I visited or slept over was never like this house, so I was in love with it immediately. Something about this house in particular that set it out from the others was not only its unusual shape, but something that I had never seen before. This house had an attic. Australian houses don't typically have them. My parents helped me move in and unpack, and they left me for my first night alone. I ended up exploring all around the house and going up into the attic. I found some large boxes. They weren't taped up or anything, so I had a peek inside. One was just full of pillows and blankets, and the other was full of cups and jars. They must belong to the landlord, I thought. It was really neat up there. It was free of dust, but it had this strange smell. I suspected we had rats. The way up and down to the attic was from a pull-down staircase. You could get access from the hallway. It folded up and disappeared into the ceiling. I had to use a long pole with a hook on the end to descend the stairs again. If you weren't looking for the loop, you would never be able to tell that there was a hidden access in the ceiling. The house itself had 2 bedrooms. I had the main bedroom, and the other I had set up as a study room. However, I was considering maybe inviting a friend to live with me later. The first couple of months were amazingly smooth. I would wake up, go to uni, come home. Mum or Dad often came and dropped off some extra dinner because they had not gotten used to only cooking for 2 people just yet. On the weekends, I'd walk around to their house, have breakfast with Mum, Dad. Mum would do my washing. I would have chats and fill them in. Studying at the house was amazing too, because I didn't have anyone making any sounds, distracting me, phones ringing. I started to really exceed in almost all of my subjects. With the changes in my life, the fact that I had really started to succeed in my studies was just a wonderful feeling. Like pure happiness, true happiness. With all this extra energy and quiet time on my hands, I decided to pull a number of an advertisement on our uni public notice board. Thomas was a foreign student looking for some extra income and was advertising his services as a private French tutor. I thought this was a wonderful idea. My family's background is French, and even though my parents and myself are very much Australians, I still have family who resides over there, and I wanted to maybe take a gap year and go if I had the chance. So I called Thomas and we organised our first lesson. We went to a coffee club. I found it really hard to concentrate due to all the noise. I had gotten so used to studying in complete silence at my home that I really felt overwhelmed in the cafe. So when it came time to organise a second lesson, I invited him to hold it at my house instead. He didn't seem bothered by this, and I felt like he was a completely normal person and everything would be fine. I was also aware that my parents were just a few streets away, so if I ever needed help, I could just run. The next week, Thomas came round and the lesson was great. At least that's what I thought. When we ran out of time, Thomas excused himself and went to the bathroom before heading back to his place. When he got out of the bathroom, he was white as a sheet. He packed up real fast and he left. At the time, I didn't really put too much thought in it. But when I called for another session, he declined and said he was busy. That's okay, I thought. He's a uni student. That's something we are. We're busy. Ended up calling 3 more times over the next couple of weeks to book a new session. Each time I was declined, so I decided to ask right out what was wrong. But what he said shocked me. He told me that when he was in the bathroom, just as he was finishing up and washing his hands, he heard a voice. The voice was through the wall and it told him to get out.
Get out.
He was so embarrassed, he couldn't decide if it was me or potentially a ghost. And when he came out and I didn't play it off like a joke or like I intended to scare him or anything, I just acted normal. He thought maybe I was mentally unstable. I was absolutely gutted. I mean, sure, if someone was in my house and I didn't know them and I didn't know what they were capable of, and there's only 2 of us there, and I heard something like that and they didn't allude to anything that happened or come off as a joke afterwards, I might also consider something like that. But I wasn't ready for it to be targeted at me. I was upset, but I kept my cool and I told him it wasn't me. I told him that he must have imagined it, or maybe he heard the neighbor's TV through the window. I don't know. I went on like this for a while. A day later, I got a message from Thomas apologizing. He thought about it and he guessed it was possible that maybe it could have been the neighbor's TV or something. He said he's convinced by my persistence and he'll give me another lesson. So after we forgave each other and he came back, we had a good lesson. The next morning, I was cleaning up the dining room table where we were sitting from our lesson. We had reference materials scattered all around, and then I found something that was confusing. A bra of mine was in the middle of the floor in the lounge room. At this stage, let me explain the layout of the house a little bit so you can understand why this is confusing. So you come up the little ramp to the front door, and that's the entryway that leads into the lounge room where I found my bra. From there's an open archway that leads into the dining room, which is separated by a breakfast buffet styled wall that is connected to the kitchen. There's a very small hallway space between there and the bathroom, which contains a washing machine and a door to the backyard. A little further along the hallway are the 2 bedrooms. So I had woken up. I walked down the hallway, past the bathroom, through the kitchen into the dining room to clean. And in my peripheral vision, through the archway, I saw a bright orange bra. I don't own any pets, and yes, I did do my washing myself this week, but I folded all my clothes on my bed. There was no reason for my bra to make it anywhere near the lounge room. Many things started going through my head at this point. I considered maybe Thomas got it caught on his shoe. It had dropped in the bathroom. He didn't notice and he trailed it there. That maybe he tried to pocket it and dropped it there upon his leaving. The problem was I couldn't see Thomas like that. He had never once flirted with me. He never even brought snacks to our sessions. I honestly didn't know what to make of the situation. So I invited my best friend over on the weekend so we could talk about it. My best friend Kara, who's my best friend still to this day. We had known each other since high school. She came over and we chatted about the event. I explained the situation and she wasn't convinced that he didn't try and steal them. I think Kara is a little bit jaded when it comes to this sort of stuff, but in the end I agreed. There was no other option. That was until we were sitting on the couch. We had the lights off, a popcorn bowl, and we were watching The Emperor's New Groove together. Everything was fun and we were giggling, right up to the point where we heard something that sounded like a door slam. It slammed very hard and it sounded like it was within the house. I jumped so high from fright that I bounced at least half of the popcorn out of the bowl onto the floor and all over the couch. Kara and I were looking at each other. We paused the movie. We crept up and turned the light in the living room on. We were both peeking around the corner of the arch that leads into the dining room and the hallway beyond. I couldn't see anything. We decided to creep forward together, turning on all the lights as we went. We stopped by the kitchen and we both grabbed sharp knives. Knives in hand, we walked through the hallway together. In the hallway, we could see the bathroom and both the bedroom doors were in fact already open. So none of them could have slammed. Together we worked up the courage to go into every single room, and we even checked out all the cupboards, but there was nothing. On the way back down the hall, we noticed that the backyard door in the bathroom was of course closed and locked. Kara came up with this brilliant idea that maybe I was an idiot. And maybe I had left the back door open. The wind picked it up and slammed it so hard that it locked it too. I felt so silly because I had been outside and maybe that happened. I still felt on edge though. Somewhere deep in my dark mind, I was thinking that maybe someone was in the house. Maybe someone was still in the house. That they used the door to escape and it slammed. Of course, I didn't mention this to Kara. The next morning, we walked to my parents' house and had breakfast there. Kara was telling Mum and Dad all about the event. They ended up berating me the whole morning. That I need to keep doors closed, that I need to lock them, that one day I'll come home and everything will be gone. I didn't like it. I was very irritated that morning. I started to feel that all my progress, all my success, my high on life feeling was now crumbling quickly. About a week passed, and I was in my study room finishing up an assignment when I heard what sounded like a supporting beam or something in the roof creak. I instantly froze and looked up. After all this time, I'd never heard the house make a single settling sound. I picked up my phone, walked out to the front, onto the street, and I looked at the house as I called Dad. He picked up and I told him what happened, and he instantly started laughing. He said that they had also had a possum on their roof this very night, and not to worry. He said they sound like bowling balls and they're not dangerous. After the phone call, I stood and looked at the house for a long time, debating whether or not I wanted to go back inside. No lights turned on or off, things didn't seem strange. I was just standing there looking at the house that I had lived in all those past months, not sure of how I was feeling. I worked up my courage and I ended up going back inside. I went back to studying and it was about 20 minutes later that I heard another creak, and before I knew it, I was walking down the street to my parents' house. When I got there, Dad exploded into laughter, called me a scaredy cat, but they let me stay. Of course they did. They're my parents. In the morning, I felt better. I was even laughing along with Dad at how silly I was being. I knew possums were in the area. Hell, I've even heard them on my parents' house plenty of times. Just felt different. I was all alone and I was scared. I thought it was time to invite my friend to come live with me, so I would stop being so paranoid over stupid things. I asked my friend and she agreed, but she had 2 more months left on her current lease, and she could only move after that. I knew she didn't have parents paying for her rent, and getting the bond back on her current rental was important to her. I heard the creaks a few more times over the week, only at night, which kind of helped me control my fear, as I knew possums were active only at night time. After all, there's no rules saying that ghosts were only active at night, right? Hauntings can happen in the day. I ended up calling Thomas and apologizing that I hadn't organized another lesson in a little while, that I was just really busy with uni, and he said that he understood. So he arrived, and we had our lesson, and it was good, right up to the point that he came storming out of the bathroom again, pale-faced. Said that he thought someone was walking around at the roof above him. I laughed. It was actually kind of relieving that someone else could get just as scared over a possum as me. I tried to tell him that it was just the possums, but he wouldn't hear any of it, and he wanted to leave, and he wanted to leave immediately. He said my house is haunted, and that if I care for my own safety, that I wouldn't mess with any of it, and I'd go back to my parents' house this very night. The strength of his argument disturbed me, because I, of course, had similar thoughts and fears. But I had been doing very well controlling them over these past few weeks, and I had just come to accept that it's not actually ghosts. After all, I hadn't come home to my cupboards being open, and things on my dresser weren't suddenly upside down for no reason. Thomas called me the next morning just to make sure I was still alive. I laughed it off. Eventually he admitted that he was behaving a little bit silly, and since he left in the middle of our session, he owed me another one on the house. But even though he admitted how silly he was being, he made it very clear that next time it had to be at his house or somewhere else, but he was never coming back to my house. So the next week I went to his house for the lesson. He lived with 2 other people, and it was a little noisy, but it was acceptable. By the time we finished our lesson, there was a raging storm. There was thunder and lightning, and it was really quite intimidating. Thomas decided to offer to drive me back so I didn't have to make the trip in the rain. I didn't own a car, so I either walked or caught a bus everywhere that I went. He took me home, and I went inside and put my bag down. Then I saw something. It was the paint on the ceiling. It looked like it had a pocket of water in it. I instantly knew that it was water. The damn roof was leaking. I rummaged through my things to get my torch. The whole time I was thinking, oh, now I understand what the sounds are. It's not the house settling. It's water's been getting in, and the beams were getting soft. I was so damn lucky that I noticed it before the whole roof collapsed in. I grabbed the stick with the hook and I pulled the latch down. The stairs descended silently. I got halfway up the stairs and I turned on my light. As I got to the top, with my torchlight following through, it shone into the attic. In the corner, there was a figure. I couldn't tell what I was looking at first. And then they stood. I practically fell backwards down the stairs. It was only sheer luck that I landed upright on my feet and didn't break my neck. I ran to the front door, not stopping to grab a single thing. As I got out the front door, I turned to shut it, and there he was, mere steps away from me, coming after me. Thomas, surprisingly, was still in my driveway. He must have been on the phone, because he had the phone to his ear, talking with this quizzled look as I came sprinting towards his car. I vaulted myself into the car, slammed the door, and told him to go. He dropped his phone and obeyed immediately. As he was screeching out of the neighborhood, I told him what happened. And all he could say was, I told you, didn't I tell you? He drove me right to the police station. As we were making our report, they sent officers to the scene. No one was there, of course, when they got there. They said that they found proof that someone was staying in the attic, food wrappers, bedding. Turns out that there were a bunch of tiles that had been popped off the roof and that they were just sitting in their place, not actually being attached. My dad was angry and horrified and felt so guilty that he laughed at my fears. My family wanted me to move back in. The thing was, The first time that I went up into that attic, I remember the bedding that was up there. The person must have been there before I moved in. For months and months and months, I never knew that I had a secret housemate. I ended up moving in with Thomas eventually, and 6 months later we started dating. Thanks for listening, everyone, and don't forget, subscribe for more content.